So we are right now coming up on the nearly 3-year anniversary of the death of George Floyd and the subsequent riots that absolutely devastated this country, and that devastation was concentrated in a lot of specific areas that we still have yet to recover from, and honestly, we have a long way in order to deal with the fallout of these Black Lives Matter riots. And in light of this, I actually stumbled upon a video that showed different areas of Minneapolis, the city where George Floyd passed away, and the subsequent damage to all these different buildings, comparing 2020 to how it looks today. And I think this is very instructive because one of the things that I was saying at the time, and a lot of people who weren't just pandering to rioters and endorsing violence, breaking the social contract of our country, by the way, were saying, was that the riots are going to cause damage, drive the area into poverty, and create all the problems that supposedly systemic racism are creating in the United States of America based on this behavior. And by the way, this wasn't theoretical, this wasn't hypothetical. It is inarguable that riots, specifically race riots, completely obliterate an area. I remember I talked about how the Martin Luther King riots were responsible for the death of Detroit. They never recovered from that, and Martin Luther King was killed in the 60s. I also talked about this study of the LA riots, the Rodney King riots from the 90s, which said that it took nearly a decade for the areas where the rioting occurred to get back to where they were previous, which still made them a decade behind everybody else. There was about $5 billion in lost economic activity, and there was actually a side-by-side comparison in one of the studies to that area of Los Angeles versus what happened in an area in Florida where they were hit by a storm and a similar dollar amount of damage happened, and how quickly reinvestment came back to Florida as compared to the specific areas of California. So everybody knew rioting was devastating. Everybody knew that it was immoral. It was unjustified. Oftentimes, these race riots target innocent victims. In fact, almost all the time, they target innocent victims in businesses, as we talked about what they did to the Koreans in the LA riots.
Why are we the victims? I mean, my friends are good Christians. I mean, we've been through so much, and to go through this, I mean, everything 22 years down the drain.
Many Koreans who yesterday were the shopkeepers of South Central Los Angeles today have lost the businesses they took years to create.
What can I say? I don't have any word to say. That's really a comeback, John.
George Huang woke this morning to find his mini mall burnt to the ground. A loss of $1.5 million and a lifetime of dreams and effort.
I don't mind that. Whatever they need to take it out. But why they burn out the property? That's my question.
You know, every once in a while when I cover instances that I've talked about before, like for instance, the damage to the Koreans during the LA riots, I stumble upon some new information that I haven't heard before that I have to share with you. And this NPR article has an absolute gem, because one of the things that the black people in the area thought at the time was that they were going to directly benefit from the destruction of the 2,200 Korean businesses that occurred during the LA riots. From an unidentified woman, 5 to 10 years from now, this place is going to be so nice. All this down here is going to be black-owned business. She's going to have a nail shop. She's going to have a beauty shop. It's going to be our turn. It's our turn now. Unidentified man number 3. If you start to transfer ownership of the community to the community, everyone will prosper. And what I think about when I see quotes like this, obviously it didn't work out. Obviously, I'm covering articles that not only say it took 10 years to get back to regular sales, but actually 3 decades later, these areas haven't recovered, are the people in my audience that I've met that happen to be black, that clearly and obviously don't think like this, that want to prosper, that understand that they are not up against any other group, they are only competing with themselves, and how they're essentially held hostage despite the fact that they're good people by people like this and by attitudes like this. It's honestly heartbreaking to read how stupid people are, and it's unsurprising when you look back at the LA riots and how people thought they would benefit from them because it was going to be all black businesses from there, that people did support the George Floyd riots.
I'm not surprised that the Koreans got targeted because their prices are high, their attitude is wrong, and they just don't seem to have any respect for the black community.
And of course, the Black Lives Matter riots were no different, except for the fact that they were more destructive than any other riots in American history. Now, this video has some copyrighted music, so I'm going to be talking over it so that way you could see it, but really, it's the imagery that I want you to see, and I will be describing it for the podcast listeners. It will be linked in the description if you want to watch it in full. That is quite stark comparing 2020 to current year, because entire blocks are completely eviscerated by the Black Lives Matter riots. So the first thing that is shown is one of the police stations of many that were attacked by Black Lives Matter rioters, and as you can see, the building looks like it was actually bombed by a foreign country. In fact, I've seen bomb attacks from Russia against Ukraine that have done less damage than what we're seeing right here. It's absolutely devastating, and symbolically, them destroying the headquarters of the police really lets you know that lawlessness has taken over Minneapolis. And by the way, homicide rate, all-time highs, all these other problems which are effects of them driving themselves into poverty through this criminality also are everlasting consequences, but this perfect example of it, and you get the premise of the video. They pan one way, then they pan back, and you see what it looks like today. So right here, you see a liquor store. It's completely burned up. Again, I've seen less damage in war zones than what looks like happened in this area, and it's absolutely devastated. These are just the rioting and the looting and all the effects that was supposedly called civil rights protesting in the year 2020, and how it absolutely devastated the area. But the devastation is going to be more significant. Check this out. Now, even though in this particular instance, the building itself doesn't look like it was completely obliterated, what I really want you to focus on is the signage before they cut to how it looked post the riots, because I think that is infinitely more telling. We had a Denny's on the corner, another store with a green sign right next to it, and the whole first floor of this building appeared to be a different varieties of shops and whatnot, and almost all of them are gone. All of these businesses, all of these jobs, the people who used to come and shop here, hang out here, eat here, and all of that, no longer have these places, and it's replaced with this boarded up, tagged up, absolute degradation of a community, and I just want you to realize that those businesses likely aren't coming back. So here we have a Popeye's chicken, and honestly, controversial take, I actually prefer the Popeye's spicy chicken sandwich to the Chick-fil-A one. Go ahead, skewer me in the comments, but guess what? The conversation is irrelevant because the Popeye's chicken that was there, gone completely. The building's just obliterated. It's just gone. They torched it. It had to be torn down. It was condemned. Popeye's chicken absolutely obliterated according to this video. So here we have another restaurant. I believe it's called a Perkins. I've never heard of it. Could be a chain, could be a local to the area. But like I said before in that video of the building, what is important here is not necessarily the fact that you're going to see it boarded up, but what I think is important is the fact that the signage is completely removed. The business has left. This is not a situation where they boarded up because of the rioting. This is a situation where the building is completely abandoned and it's boarded up to keep the addicts out. Maybe it's going to be torn down in the future, but point being, no business replaced what was lost. Now we have a building like one of the ones that we saw earlier, and you can see a bunch of different shops on the first floor, but the stark difference between what you see initially and after this, again, harkens back to images of wartime. Now, I have to say this Speedway is my absolute favorite of all of the ones here because the gas station's completely obliterated, but as you can see, it's written where there's people, there's power. Well, guess what? You devastated your community. There's no people here, so you quite literally destroyed the power. In that gasoline is a power source, and no people are going to this gas station. It looks sketchy as hell. And you just ruined it. You ruined your entire community, supposedly for civil rights. And then we wrap with the Family Dollar, also torn down. And it's at this point in time that I want to remind you that Trevor Noah over at The Daily Show was making the case during the Black Lives Matter riots when people were saying you shouldn't loot Target, that, you know, not looting Target hasn't worked, so maybe we should try that.
And a lot of people say, well, what good does this do? Yeah, but what good doesn't it do? That's the question people don't ask the other way around. What good does it do to loot Target? How does it help you to loot Target? Yeah, but how does it help you to not loot Target? Answer that question.
And again, Trevor Noah was just one of many people who were saying these ridiculous things at the time, excusing the riots when we had all of the data. Everybody could see what was happening. Everybody could predict it to show that this is exactly how areas impacted by rioting would turn out to be. Family Dollar completely wiped off the board. Speedway wiped out. Gas stations wiped out. I still remember, and I'll never forget it, when we had a story of this group, I think they were religious, bringing in diapers and baby formula and vegetables and food to the area to support the Black Lives Matter rioters because they had destroyed every single grocery store in the area. There was no place for the people to actually get diapers for their kids just a few days into the Black Lives Matter rioting, and this area has not recovered. And by the way, I want to give credit to Brad Polumbo, who I actually was on his channel a long time ago to discuss qualified immunity, which, by the way, we completely disagreed on, for writing this amazing article talking about the cost of the Black Lives Matter riots. Because one of the things that you often hear is this $2 billion number, that the Black Lives Matter riots were the most expensive riots in American history because they cost this country $2 billion in damages. And as Brad points out in this fantastic article, which will be linked in full in the description, that $2 billion number is only the number for insured losses. So this is what was actually reimbursed to retailers and to homeowners and to affected parties based on the Black Lives Matter riot. But as Brad pointed out, insurance is not this silver bullet against the downsides of rioting. 75% of US businesses do not have the adequate insurance in order to deal with something like riots. And 40% of small businesses don't have any insurance at all. So all of their losses don't show up in that $2 billion figure. And to give you a bit of a refresher on this, if you'll remember, a lot of people who own small businesses that did have insurance, but it didn't cover the absolute obliteration of entire blocks that was caused by these Black Lives Matter rioters, found out that they could only get about $25,000 in order to destroy their condemned building in order to prevent them from being fined further by the city. That was what their insurance covered, and there was case after case after case of this just out of the city of Minneapolis. Well, this was something that happened nationwide, and those businesses that had no insurance that should have been perfectly fine, they're gone. They're done. There was no rehabilitation for them. There was no compensation for them. There was nobody to sue. They were just left devastated, and that's what we're seeing across the city. And again, this is just Minneapolis. This is just the epicenter of the Black Lives Matter riots. Make no mistake, these riots occurred all over the country, and we're still seeing the effects in closings, businesses not recovered, no new building in these areas, and of course, in high rates of violent crime, huge spikes in certain areas, some places getting record crime spikes, and it's just horrific. And what I can't emphasize enough is that we knew that this was the consequence of these actions. We had the LA riots as an example. We had the Martin Luther King riots as an example, and yet time after time on channel after channel, we got defenses of rioting. We got excuses of rioting. And one of the ones that I'll never forget circulated widely online and was actually played on John Oliver's Last Week Tonight, which was this overweight woman, this Black Lives Matter activist, talking about how we don't own anything and it's okay because you deserve it and you actually broke the social contract, whatever, justify the rioting, and look at where these areas are now.
So I've been seeing a lot of things talking of the people making commentary. Interestingly enough, the ones I've noticed that have been making the commentary are wealthy black people making the commentary about we should not be rioting, we should not be looting, we should not be tearing up our own communities. And then there's been an argument of the other side of we should be hitting them in the pocket. We should be focusing on the blackout days where we don't spend money. But, you know, I feel like we should do both. So when they say, why do you burn down the community? Why do you burn down your own neighborhood? It's not ours. We don't own anything. We don't own anything. Trevor Noah said it so beautifully last night. There's a social contract that we all have. That if you steal or if I steal, then the person who is the authority comes in and they fix the situation. But the person who fixes the situation is killing us. So the social contract is broken. And if the social contract is broken, why the f*** do I give a about burning the Football Hall of Fame, about burning the Target?
And unsurprisingly, that large woman who was just yelling for the cameras doing this performance art was not negatively impacted by the Black Lives Matter riots. You think she shops at Family Dollar? You think she shops at Target? You think she goes to any of those small businesses that are in Minneapolis? Absolutely not. John Oliver, no impact. Trevor Noah, no impact. Black Lives Matter, the organization, no accountability. They got tons and tons of money based on the hysteria. In fact, the only downside for Black Lives Matter was that certain individuals set up charities with BLM in the name and were able to divert some of the money from the official scam that is Black Lives Matter. Kamala Harris, who actually tweeted out a bail fund for these rioters to destroy this area even further, vice president. So when you see videos of the devastation, like the one that I showed you throughout the course of this video, when you wonder where your stores are, why your neighborhoods look like crap, why poverty is increasing in this area, and how it's being driven by the crime that it's actually feeding into as well, just remember, it wasn't me. It wasn't conservatives, it wasn't the police, it wasn't the evil white racists, it wasn't the ghost of white supremacy past, it was Democratic elites, Democratic politicians, mainstream media pundits, so-called comedians that speak with a voice of the people, the Black Lives Matter organization, and all these other people who knew for a fact that this kind of behavior would have long-term devastating economic consequences for the people allegedly that they're trying to advocate for, that not only excused this, but cheered it on, supported it, told you, you know what, this thing that has never worked throughout American history, that has only caused irreparable damage to the communities where it's happened, called race riots, maybe give that a try and it will work this time. That's why Minneapolis is garbage. That's why they have a record homicide rate. That's why all these areas across this country are getting significantly worse. It's because you allowed the violence, you allowed the looting, you allowed the rioting to commence, and you pretended like the consequences were something that you were just going to be able to ignore. Well, you can't ignore it. We're 3 years in and Minneapolis has still not recovered. And guess what? 10 years from now, they likely still won't have recovered. Now, maybe you think it's worth it. Maybe you think you honored St. George Floyd by stealing all that stuff and burning the businesses that your community relied on. But I'm going to have to hard disagree on that and say that you ruined your own lives. You ruined your own communities. You ruined some great American cities. And honestly, we should have some accountability for the people who profited off of promoting this, but we're never going to get it. But hey, those are just my thoughts. So let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. If you like the video, show me by leaving a like, subscribe for more content, follow me on all my social medias, support me via the support links in the description of this video. This has been me talking about, yet again, the Black Lives Matter riots completely devastating this country. Till next time.